great. Give him all the praise. Hallelujah, name above all names. Fire in his eyes, healing in his veins. Everywhere is glory on display. Take a look at those stars, you can name them all. Before his throne, every knee falls. The demons have to run, the angels have to praise. Even the wind and waves obey our God. Is an awesome God, he reigns from heaven above.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome to this is our 10th annual summit that we do through CHI, North Dakota Violence Prevention. We offer this, you guys, every year just to create awareness, enhance knowledge, build a network of professionals. I'm so pleased to see all you here, just committed to creating healthier, safer communities and families. My name is Naomi Cook. I have the pleasure of directing this amazing ministry. We call it CHI Violence Prevention Program. I'm the survivor of domestic abuse. God's now using that experience for me to get out there and help other people. So I'm just on this journey, guys. So our mission through CHI is to prevent domestic abuse through two main strategies. We build community capacity, and then we enhance organizational awareness, and we use those things together. So this program trains community outreach leaders and healthy relationship facilitators who then train professionals, people, churches, people in prisons, students, all over our state. So we really are just collaborating with all sorts of folks. So that's what I say my job is. I get to talk all day long. That's all I do. I talk, I collaborate, I meet. It's so amazing. But in the end, we have this huge group of people doing this work. So additionally, one of my favorite things we get to do is we collaborate with nationally known speakers, and we put this day on every single year. We do this free, so all of our colleagues, all of our communities can come and attend. So next, I would like to introduce my dearest friend, my violence prevention partner, Lori McConaughey. And she's graciously offered to help me MC this event today. Lori is a pastor, she is a teacher, and a survivor of domestic abuse. So she would just like to say a few words.
I just want to say welcome again. We are excited that you guys are here. It's events like this that I wish had happened over 30 years ago when the abuse started in my life. And so I appreciate that you guys are coming and educating yourselves so that you can affect change in the community around you. We are so grateful for the speakers that have come to share their time and knowledge with us as well.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, because domestic and sexual violence are so prevalent, we know there are survivors of that in this room. Please respect each other's privacy, confidentiality, please. Be aware of your own reactions, and it's okay to struggle. And if you need to step out, we have a beautiful area outside. We've got several quiet rooms, and we are supposed to have some folks from our Domestic Violence Advocacy Center, APOC, here today. Just take care of yourself, and if you needed to talk to somebody, Lori or I would be happy to do that with you. So we have just a few housekeeping items, and then we're going to get going. So at the very front, we had a desk set up for registration, so please make sure you signed in for continuing ed and you got your folder. Also, we have 3 door prizes to give away today, so if you did not get your name dropped in the bucket during a break, go ahead and do that. Make sure we get that going for you too. Instructions for requesting continuing ed will come at the end. We're going to have a QR code that leads to an eval, so we'll walk through that. It's very simple progress. And then after that, if you have any issues, you reach out and we'll help you get your CE. For those of you who are watching on our live stream, and there are a lot of people, we've got people from about 5 different states watching. You can drop any questions into the chat, and then Pastor Logan can put those down onto cards, okay? And we'll make sure we get those asked. So our presenters typically don't mind a Q&A at the end of their sessions. And at the end of the day today, we're going to put a panel discussion together. So we have some cards on that back table, you guys. So if you would be thinking of questions that you would want to ask this panel, Pat Sand, our sheriff's deputy, he volunteered to potentially sit on the panel as well. So write your questions down. We have them right in that middle basket on that middle table. Just write your questions down and we'll get them asked to our panel. The restrooms in beautiful Connect Church are located out that way in the refuel area. There's also restrooms located at the bottom of the stairs. So we're going to have food out here all day long. We're going to break for lunch and have a sit-down meal downstairs in the basement. And then in the afternoon, we'll have more refreshments. So nobody should go away hungry today. Okay, so now I would like to call on our pastor, Pastor Logan Wells, who pastors this beautiful church we belong to come up and pray for us. And then we're going to get started. So please welcome Pastor Wells.
You'll learn as I begin to pray, I'm not from North Dakota, so if you need translation, just speak to me afterwards. But I met Naomi 8 months ago, and I absolutely love to partner with her in what she does. And thank you, guys. Thank you for watching the live stream, for all that she does. But can we pray in the name of Jesus this morning? Father, we come to you in the sweet name of your Son, by the power of the Holy Ghost. And Lord, I just thank you for each person represented here, Lord, each victim represented here, Lord, and each advocate represented here, and each law enforcement first responder represented here. Lord, we long to be your hands and feet on this earth that you gave us. And Lord, just today, in your name, we ask you to help us prevent, help us know what to look for, help us know what to identify. And God, through this, that your mercy and your grace reigns through. And Lord, nothing is bigger than your blood. And Lord, help us counsel in the future and help us be preventers. And so, Lord, I just pray over our speakers right now. I pray an anointing on them in the name of Jesus Christ. And so, Lord, have your will and your way in this place. And all God's kiddos said, amen.
Thank you, Pastor. We appreciate you. Okay, so we're going to get right into it. I am honored to have these amazing presenters here in Valley City. Just absolutely, I'm so excited today, you guys. I've been waiting for this day. Oh, thank you all for coming. I know we have people on live stream too, so we don't ever want to ignore that. We have people right now currently from North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and Illinois watching. So that's pretty amazing. So now, I have the pleasure of introducing Pastor Neil Shorey. Pastor Neil is the Director of Church Partnerships at Call to Peace Ministries, and he brings 20 years of full-time pastoral experience to the CPTM team, including roles in family care, counseling, community groups, and assimilation. As the former lead pastor of Naperville Christian Church, and later a pastor at the Edge Church, Neil has spent the past 15 years equipping churches to serve as safe havens for those in need. He holds a master's degree in counseling and possesses a deep commitment to advocacy. Neil is dedicated to bridging the gap between faith communities and survivors. Pastor Neil Shorey shares his personal experience counseling Stacy Peterson. Stacy went missing shortly after telling Pastor Neil that her husband, Drew Peterson, had confessed to her that he had killed his former wife, Kathleen Savio. So let's please welcome Pastor Neil Shorey.
Thank you. Okay, you can hear me now? Okay, so you probably couldn't hear my thoughts. No, I'm just, if this mic really could pick up my thoughts, it would be picking up gratitude. Super grateful to be here with you. Domestic violence is it's a hard thing to talk about, but it's essential for us to do so. I'm just really glad to be here to share a little bit of my story and how I got involved in this. If someone had told me years ago that I was going to be an advocate for victims of domestic violence, it wouldn't have made any sense to me. And it never really does, right? It's not like this is something that you would choose, but you go through things, and oftentimes those things that you go through become your greatest sense of purpose and calling, and I believe that's what's happened to me. So how did I get here? It all came through a woman named Stacy Peterson, as Naomi shared. I was brand new in ministry, and just like it happens a lot of times in life, you sort of like you start a new job and you start to get comfortable in it, and a year or so into being a counseling pastor at a large church in the Chicago suburbs, I felt like I'd seen kind of everything. Have you ever felt like that before, where you're not really wondering what's going to happen the next day at work? I got pretty comfortable in sitting with people and talking about their marriages, and sitting with people and talking about gender issues, and sitting with people and talking about self-harm, and just lots and lots of things. And we think we're used to something, and then we're thrown a curveball. So one Sunday after service, a woman walked up to me, and I recognized her because I remember that she would walk in often with my wife because they were both carrying car seats of our babies. And she came up to me, she said, "I believe your name's Neil, you're the counseling pastor here, right?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Is there any way that we could get together in the next week or so and talk about," and this is what she called it, "regular marriage issues?" And I said, "Oh, yes, regular marriage issues. I love talking about marriage issues. Let's do that. So we got together at a coffee shop. There was a Caribou Coffee down the street at the time. Those are pretty much all out of Illinois. I don't know if you guys have them here or not. But it was a great coffee shop. And we sat down, and she told me about her life married to Drew. And she would tell me things. She said, "We haven't been married that long, and we really love each other. But, sometimes he's a little bit jealous, but it's okay. It's okay. It's because he loves me so much. He's jealous because he loves me so much." And I remember thinking, I feel like she's trying to convince herself that that's true. She gave me details, and she'd say that she'd go to Aldi to the grocery store, and if she was gone like 1 or 2 minutes longer than what she said she'd be gone, she'd get a whole bunch of phone calls. And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by a whole bunch of phone calls?" And she goes, "Oh, it's not that bad. Maybe 30 times. And I'm like, he'd call you 30 times? 30 times when you went to Aldi down the street from your house? And she goes, yeah, it's okay. It's because he loves me so much." I just thought, that's weird. This feels weird, but she's telling me that. She'd tell me things over and over just about their interactions, and she said, "Yeah, this was helpful." She said, "Maybe you could talk to Drew next." So I made an appointment with him, and I sat down with the two of them together. And the first thing that I noticed is when he walked in, I was really shocked because it looked like father and daughter. At the time, he was 53 and she was 23. They got together when he was 47 and she was 17. Now, Drew was a police officer in Bolingbrook, Illinois, pretty well respected. Got in trouble at times, but he definitely had a lot of clout in the Bolingbrook Police Department. So he walked in, and he was pretty cocky, and they sat on the same side of the table together, and I thought, that's interesting. I thought middle schoolers did that. They sat there, and I noticed that when I would ask Stacy a question that was very specifically for her, Drew would he looked hesitant, and she'd glance over at him and sometimes almost wince. I felt like she was being pinched under the table. And sometimes he would answer, and at one point, I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I asked Stacy that." He didn't like that a whole lot, as you might imagine, so that was the end of the second session. So over the course of about 18 months, I met with them individually or together 5 or 6 times, and I heard situations like that over and over and over again. I'm going to fast forward to the very last meeting that I had with Stacy, and it stands out to me. It was August 31st, 2007. She had reached out to me the day before, and she said, "Neil, I don't know if you have any space on your calendar tomorrow." She said, "But I really need to talk to you about something." And I remember looking at my Outlook on my computer, and I saw that I actually did have space the very next morning. And I'm like, "Well, actually, I do. Let's meet." So we met at 8:30 or so at a Starbucks right down the street from the church. And I remember pulling up to Starbucks, and she was already sitting outside. And I thought, wow, she got here quick. So I went inside, grabbed a cup of coffee, came outside to the cafe, and I sat down with her. And for about 30 minutes, she shared all the things that she'd kind of always shared. It felt like she just needed to tell her story, rehash it. Yeah, he is jealous. Yeah, it's really because he loves me. She seemed tired, worn out, and I felt like there was something behind what she was saying. I felt like she wanted to say more. And suddenly she looks at me and she said, "Neil, I think I want to tell you something else." And I said, "That's why I'm here. You can tell me anything that you'd like." And she goes, kind of paused, and I could feel that she was thinking about sharing something, and she talked a little bit more about kind of like the things. It felt like she was going around in a circle a little bit. And suddenly she blurted out something that I knew was the hardest thing that she'd ever shared in her life. And she just goes, "Neil, he did it." And I went, "Whoa, he did what?" She said, "Drew killed Kathleen and made it look like an accident." And I said, whoa, Drew killed who's Kathleen? She goes, "Drew's third wife. I'm his fourth." And I said, "Oh." And all of a sudden I remember thinking, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea what to do, and I'm supposed to know what to do. I have a master's degree in counseling, and I'd never had one class in domestic violence, not one. And I sat there and I looked at her and I said, "Can you tell me, how do you know? How do you know?" And she went through and she said, "Neil," she said, "we always go to bed at the same time together every single night. That's always how we've done it." And she said, in March of 2004, so just over 3 years earlier, she said, "One night I woke up after we'd gone to bed at the same time together and he wasn't there." She said, "That's not like him." She said, I walked all around the house and I looked for him and I couldn't find him. She said, so I started messaging him on his phone and he didn't answer. And she said, hours later, I heard him come into the mudroom with the laundry. And she said he was dressed in all black, head to toe. He had a black hat on, a black sweatshirt on, a black pants on, socks and shoes. And he was carrying a duffel bag. And he walked in and he looked at her and she said, "Where were you?" And he goes, "You know where I was." She goes, "No, Drew, I don't know where you were." He goes, "You know where I was." And she said, as he said that, he started taking his clothes off and he put them in the washing machine and he unzipped the duffel bag and he dumped the contents into the washing machine. And she said, and then he walked out of the room and she looked into the washing machine and there were women's clothes that weren't hers. She said about an hour later, he found her in the house and he said, "I'm going to tell you what's going to happen." He said, "Really soon the police are going to be here." Remember, Drew was the police. He said, "But the police are going to be here and they're going to ask you a bunch of questions." And he said, "If you tell them what I tell you to say, this will be the perfect crime." What do you think a 23-year-old is going to do when her 53-year-old police officer husband is sitting down with her and saying, "You're going to say this and it's going to be the perfect crime"? She did exactly that. As a matter of fact, when the police showed up and sat down with them, they allowed Drew to be in the room. Completely inappropriate in every way. And for over 3 years, she held the secret and contended with the fear of living with someone who murdered at least one person. And that day, she looked at me and I said, "What do you want me to do with this?" Because I didn't know. But I also knew that she lived with him and she had to be terrified, and I wanted to respect what she wanted me to do. And she looked at me, and I'll never forget her. I'll never forget it. She pulled her knee really close up to her body, and a tear streamed down her face. And she stared through my soul. And she said, "Neil, I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to know." So I didn't do anything. I went back to my office after leaving her, and the voicemail red light was flashing on my phone back when we used to have office phones. And I picked up the phone and I checked my voicemail, and it was Drew Peterson. "Hey, Neil, it's Drew. I know you're with Stace today, and I haven't seen you in a while. It's a really beautiful day out. I was wondering if you want to meet me over at Clow, over at the airport. Maybe we can take a ride in my ultralight. And I knew in that moment that I had to call him back immediately. So I called him back. I said, oh, hey, Drew, yeah, I was with Stacy today. You know what? I would love to do that. I would love to have a ride in your ultralight, but I can't right now. My wife is on bed rest with our twins. We're about to have twin daughters. Drew, do you remember that? And he goes, oh, yeah. I said, so I'm going to have to take a rain check because I pretty much just go to work and then I come home and I take care of my 3-year-old while my wife's on bed rest. You good with that? He just goes, oh, yeah. No problem, Neil. We'll do a rain check. And I remember hanging up the phone and knowing deep down in the knower that I just avoided something really, really significant. 2 months after that, I got an early morning phone call from one of my coworkers at that church. She said, Neil, did you see the front page of the Chicago Tribune? That's back when people actually still read newspapers. I said, no. And she said, it says that Stacy Peterson went missing. That's the last thing that I remember her saying. I dropped my cell phone. I ran up the stairs of my townhouse. I grabbed my wife and I hugged her and I started crying and I said, Stacy's gone. I know that Drew killed her just like he killed Kathleen. Really quickly, this became a big story. And the national news started spreading everywhere. People followed me and my wife everywhere. Tried to get us to talk about things. Someone leaked my name to the media. It was not me. But once it's leaked, it's out. And it's really intense. The state police set up a tip line for missing Stacy Peterson. So I thought that meant that they wanted information. So I called the tip line. And I didn't leave my information on there, but I said, hey, I was Stacy's pastor. I have information. You might want to give me a call back. They never called. So I went to the state police headquarters, District 5 in Crest Hill, Illinois, and I went in and I went to the front desk and I said, hey, I left a voicemail. I have information about Stacy Peterson. We'll get back to you if we need to. Never called. God has a way of making things happen no matter what, and I'm pretty tenacious. So I went back there and I said, it's time to talk. So we did. Spent 3 hours with 2 different officers. They videoed everything, and I wrote out everything that I knew about Drew Peterson, everything that I knew about Stacy. They reopened the case. They exhumed Kathleen Savio's body. They re-autopsied her, and they reclassified it from an accident to a homicide. But it still took 1.5 years for Drew to be arrested for the murder of Kathleen Savio. He was arrested Mother's Day weekend 2009, almost exactly right in front of the Starbucks where Stacy told me. It took 3 more years to go to trial. And I testified against Drew Peterson in August of 2012, and he was convicted for the murder of Kathleen Savio. This personality type doesn't like to stay out of the news, though. And he had a vendetta against the state's attorney, so he attempted to hire his cellmate to kill Jim Glasgow, the state's attorney who put him behind bars. Fortunately, he was FBI wiretapped, very quickly charged with solicitation of murder against Jim Glasgow, and he got 60-some-odd years. He's 71 years old now. He'll never see the light of day, but he continues to try to make trouble every moment of his life, even trying to get the sentence vacated because he's mentally incompetent. Ridiculous. The judge laughed in his face. I was there. Why do I share this story with you? I share it because women tend to go to one of 3 places when they first share their story of abuse? The first place that they tend to go to, one of the three places, they go to bartenders, hairstylists, and pastors. Those are the three most common places that a victim will go and share their story of abuse. So 2 of those have formal training in domestic violence. Guess which one doesn't? Pastors. Many hairstylists have to in different states. Some restaurant workers and bartenders do. But churches tend to fight that and say, I don't want the government telling me what to do, which I get to a certain extent, but we have an epidemic here. 1 in 3 women will be victims of domestic violence and coercive control in her lifetime at the hands of her intimate partner. And that is just the physical part. I think it's worse than 1 in 3. We have a really, really big problem. Pastors are often people who are told, like me, and I'm one of those who didn't know what to do, so I'm not pointing fingers, I'm saying we have a problem. You don't want to go to a doctor who doesn't have a license to practice medicine either, do you? It's like, hey, you know what, I picked up this side gig. I do angioplasties. I'll give you a really good discount. No, I'm good, thanks. I think I'm going to wait for someone who's licensed. But most pastors have no training in domestic violence and coercive control, and I didn't either, even though, as I already said, I have a master's degree in counseling. It was never a part of the program that I attended, and that is literally tragic. So what did I do? My personality type is always looking for what's the role that I'm supposed to play in this? I'm an ENFP, so I'm always looking for the bigger picture. So after Stacy disappeared, I spent nearly 2 years praying, Lord, would you please show me what I need to know? I don't know what it is, so show me what I need to know. And he answered me in the form of a fiery advocate who is unfortunately no longer with us, but her name is Susan Murphy Milano. One of the most wonderful people that I've met. Susan became an advocate out of her own experience with abuse. Her dad was also a police officer in the city of Chicago, and he had a great reputation in the community because abusers often have great reputations in the community. Susan became an advocate because one day her dad killed her mom and killed himself on the same day. Susan found their bodies. Susan said to me when we sat down, she said, Neil, I couldn't rescue my mom, so I decided to spend the rest of my life working to rescue victims of abuse. So my 2 years of prayer led me to sit at a coffee shop with Susan, and she did not go easy on me. She saw that I'd done an interview in the media, and she said, I really just wanted to sit down with you. And for about 3 years, she asked me all sorts of questions. It felt like 3 years. For about 3 hours, she asked me all sorts of questions. Someone who asks you good questions can make you feel like an hour is a year. And she said, Neil, why didn't you write this down? How come you don't have a relationship with the shelter in town? Why did you do this? Why didn't you do this? And I'm just taking notes. I don't know, because I didn't know. Sorry, I didn't know, so that's why I'm here. I just kept answering. I want you to tell me. And she basically looks at me, and after she had pretty much fully decimated my self-esteem, she looks at me and she said, hey, I don't know if you know this or not. She said, but churches are notoriously terrible at responding to abuse. And she said, but I really feel like if we meet a whole lot, you could help change the culture of how churches respond to abuse. Are you interested? And I said, yes. And she goes, wait a second, wait. She goes, I purposely just gave you a hard time for 3 hours. She said, I pressed on you to see how you'd respond to critique. She said, you did pretty well. She said, why'd you say yes so quickly? And I said, because I prayed for this for 2 years. And she just goes, okay, that's all you had to say. And she goes, but I'm telling you, we're going to meet a lot. And I'm like, oh, yeah, of course. Now, she really meant it. About a week later, I get a call at the church that I worked at the time, and I answer the phone, and she goes, "Hey, Neil, it's Susan. I'm going to be at your church in 10 minutes. She said, "And we're going to meet with a victim whose husband's a police officer. As a matter of fact, he's Officer of the Year in your county. We're going to meet with her." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Susan. I have like 4 different appointments scheduled for today." And she just goes, "Oh," she goes, "Neat." She goes, "Why don't you go ahead and cancel those or move them to later in the week? Because I promise you this, Neil, there's nothing that you possibly could have on your calendar that's going to be more impactful than what's about to happen in your church today." And I went, "Okay, I'll do it." She was right. And we met a lot. I have no regrets in knowing Susan Murphy Milano. As a matter of fact, just absolute joy in learning from her and then learning to equip others. But it's really, really important for us to acknowledge what we don't know as pastors and church leaders. Because we can commit spiritual malpractice when we share things that we don't understand, when we don't do a deep dive in theology that we get too loose with sharing. So we need to understand that there's a lack of education for clergy, and we need to come clean with what we don't know and then learn it and then share that information. It's really, it's evangelism. And I think this is a gospel issue. This is a gospel issue. How we respond to the oppressed shows what we really think of Jesus. He says it all through the Gospels himself. But what I can say is that in my experience, pastors often are skeptical about abuse training. They're as skeptical of abuse training as non-believers often feel about hearing about Jesus for the first time. So we offer education, and then based on how they respond, we can know what to do next. And in my experience with sharing with pastors, I've really seen 3 typical responses when I approach them. The first one is ignorance. It's not an attack. It's not a slight. I don't mean any offense whatsoever. I was ignorant. It just means they didn't know about the issue. They just didn't know that it was an issue. I've had plenty of good pastors, plenty of good friends of mine in ministry tell me, "Neil, that doesn't happen in my church. I would know it. I know my people. That doesn't happen here." Okay, well, I know it does, but often church leaders are convinced, genuinely convinced, that it doesn't happen. For many of those pastors, it just takes time for them to encounter a situation where they realize, "Oh, it does happen," and then I get a text message saying, "Hey, got a situation. Hey, I'll help." Absolutely. The second typical response is apathy. And I don't know about you, but I found it really, really hard to get people to care. You might be able to get people to pretend like they care or show up for a bit and maybe care in action just a bit, but it's hard to convince people to do it. But here's what I do know, is that the Lord cares about these things, and it's His business of awakening hearts. And it's His business to break the hearts of people that He wants to care about the things that break His heart. And I know that abuse breaks His heart. People who are lukewarm really need prayer for it. And I've seen people change from being casual bystanders who really don't care, almost like when you talk about statistics of starvation in Africa. It's like, well, I'm never going to go there, so it doesn't really matter that much to me. I've seen people turn from casual bystanders to engaged advocates. But then there's a third response, and honestly, it's evil. It's evil. We need to stop being afraid of calling things evil when they're evil. It doesn't help victims, and it doesn't help perpetrators of it either. I've seen it play out in many ways in settings in churches. When you start to speak out about abuse, pay really close attention to what people say and who wants to shut you down. Pay really close attention to it. What are they saying to get you to be quiet about it? There's a really good chance that they're not saying this: "Hey, you're getting a little too close to my personal issues." I hope I'm not discovered by what you're saying. And it's really likely that they will say things like this. You need to focus on the gospel, Pastor. Hey, Pastor Logan, I love it that you care about this issue, but you really just need to preach the gospel, brother. I feel like our church is sliding over into social justice stuff, and I don't think that's what Jesus wants, so leave that abuse talk at the door, and let's just hear the good old-fashioned gospel. You might hear things like this. When you point out abuse, you're actually bringing shame on the name of Jesus, so keep that quiet because we don't want Jesus to look bad. I've heard all these. How about this one? Ooh, are you saying, are you acting like they're just not redeemable? Everyone has sinned, Neil. Everyone falls short of the glory of God. Where's your grace? Oh, you seem so unforgiving. Are you perfect? If you don't know how to combat those things, it shuts you down pretty quickly because you're like, I've sinned, that's true. Ugh. Those aren't your people. Walk away. Don't try to convince people that don't want to be convinced. They probably have a personal motive for keeping this talk out of the house of God. I want to pivot just a bit and share with you what I believe is must-have information for pastors and clergy. I want to start by saying that women often get deadly advice from their pastors when they finally get the courage to disclose abuse. They need anything but deadly advice. They need someone to be present and to believe them. I say deadly advice, I don't even say that with a hint of hyperbole. 3 women are killed every single day in the U.S. by their intimate partners. So what do we do with that? 3 women in the U.S. every day are killed by their intimate partners. What do? We need to listen to women. Now, when I say women, am I acting like, do I think that men can't be abused? No, of course not. My focus is on women because women are disproportionately abused in comparison to men. So anyone who wants to think, well, maybe he doesn't care about men, I obviously care about men. I am one. But women are affected by this more than anyone else. The author Denise George wrote a book called What Women Wish Pastors Knew. She shared about a survey of 6,000 pastors, and they were asked about how they would counsel a woman who shared that she was being abused. I think this is fascinating and super important to hear. 26% said that they would advise the woman to submit to her husband no matter what. Oh, that must be a long time ago. It's not. And it's really, really accurate. 25% said they would tell a woman that the abuse was her fault in the first place for failing to properly submit. In other words, he wouldn't do that if you didn't act that way. And 50% of pastors said they would tell a woman that she should be willing to tolerate some level of abuse because that's actually better than getting divorced. And even if pastors do understand that victims didn't cause their abuse, oftentimes the very first question that they ask is, then why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just leave? The real question is this: why did he abuse? That's the question. Can we get used to saying that? Instead of turning the focus onto the victim and re-victimizing someone who's already been beaten down to within an inch of her life, can we get used to saying, why is he abusing? Well, I can tell you why he's not abusing. It's not anger. Anger is involved in it, but it's not about anger. This is about control and about entitlement. He looks at her as an object, not as a person created in the image of God. He looks at her as his possession. Let's put the onus on the offender and not on the victim. Women want pastors to know that religion does not change the rate of domestic violence. I've talked to many pastors who say, well, I'm sure even if it happens in my church, it's way less than the general population. And that's not true. The rate is identical through all religions, through atheists, through however people identify, it's all the same. So whether you're a Christian, Muslim, Jewish, adherents of any other faith or no faith, around 1/3 of all the women that you see in your house of worship will be abused by her intimate partner in her lifetime. And this demands a response. And even worse, religion often exacerbates the crisis. Okay, so let me just say this again. Remember, I'm a pastor too. So I don't hate pastors. I don't hate churches. I stand with the Lord. And I know that oftentimes religion exacerbates the crisis rather than mitigating it as it should. In my experience, pastors often give advice that's based on partially formed theological concepts that they've received and not thoroughly looked into. Happens all the time. They were passed down to them and not fully explored, so they don't fully understand. There are many problems with teachings on forgiveness and reconciliation. There are many problems with the ideas that people have from the Old Testament book of Malachi, which gives pastors the famous clobber verse that says, well, I wish I could give you another answer, but it says that God hates divorce. So if God hates divorce, you can't get divorced. I wish I could tell you that you could. And abusers will always play on the sympathy of well-meaning church people and leaders. You know what that means? Churches are great targets for abusers. Great targets. We've all seen this kind of thing play out in the media as we followed major court cases. You see that someone commits horrific acts of violence, and then family members come forward from different church communities, religious leaders in the community stand up, and before the body even goes into the ground, someone stands up and they say, I just want you to know we have already forgiven Bob. We've already forgiven him. It's like, oh. Then I've always gotten a weird feeling when people say those things where I'm just sort of like, are they just so much better of a person than me? Are they just so much better? Or could it be they're spiritually bypassing? They're almost gaslighting themselves. Oh, I'm supposed to say these things. I'm supposed to feel it. God's good all the time, and all the time God's good. Okay, when I hear those things, that means that there's no space to wrestle with pain. There's no space to deal with actual lament. But then there's also no space for accountability. We're stunned by what appears to be grace, but I suspect it's spiritual bypassing. That's when someone, they feel like they have to rise above their emotions because emotions are bad. They convince themselves of things like this. Well, I guess God must have needed them more than I do, so I have to pretend like everything's okay. Or the sin leveling. Well, we're all sinners, so I guess his sin's no different than mine. It's like, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Murder has a different effect than lying does. It does. You can hold two things to be true. Theology that says that one sin, no matter what, removes you from the presence of God and Jesus makes it all right. That's true, I believe. And you can also look at people with compassion and say that I know that what you've been through is different than what I've been through. And your experience of sin in this world harmed you in ways that are irreparable. And you will never be whole again on this side until you're reunited with your loved one who was taken from you so viciously. So let's talk a little bit about abusers in your church. And if that makes anyone a little bit uncomfortable, that's okay. Because they are everywhere. What should you expect from abusers when their actions eventually are dragged out into the light? I want to give you three things. Expect them to own a small part of the abuse. Expect them to own a small part of the abuse. A few weeks after a victim started attending my church, I got an email from her husband. It was long, and honestly, it appeared to be very respectful. He even said, he wrote that, while I don't know exactly what my wife told you, I really want to come clean ahead of time and just let you know that I have lost my temper with her, and one time I pushed her. Well, the thing that I wrote back to him was, well, you didn't admit the part that while you were in a fit of rage, you held her down on the bed and you strangled her. Expect them to own a part of the abuse. That was a pseudo-confession. We must take the time to understand the path that manipulators will take in the church, because oftentimes the church is the path of least resistance for abusers. Expect them to lie. Expect them to lie. The Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 44, it talks about the devil. And it says, when he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar, the father of lies. Abusers tell really good lies, too. Really good ones. They can brutalize their victims and then convince the police to arrest them. Drew Peterson's third wife, Kathleen Savio, she called the police 18 times during her marriage on Drew Peterson. She was arrested 9 of those times that she called for help. Guess how many times Drew was arrested? 0. 0. Abusers are effective liars. They will make you think that they're the victim. They will twist it, and if you don't understand the dynamics, you will be convinced, she's crazy, he's the victim. Because oftentimes she will be dysregulated from the abuse. But people don't understand those dynamics when they're not trained. Expect them to appear repentant. Expect them to appear repentant. Abusers will say with tears streaming down their face, I am so sorry. I call this the tears and flowers repentance. I am so sorry. I'll never do it again. I swear. I just lost control. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. I'll never do it again. As ministry leaders, we need to use discernment and biblical wisdom because people's lives are at stake. False repentance is tears, flowers, and promises, and no action. What does real repentance actually look like? This is really, really important to grab a hold of. Your theology, your practice of your theology is really, really important. What does it look like? It looks like actual behavior changes over a long period of time. We're talking years, not months. People can act different for months. People can stand on their head for a while. Real change will prove out over the course of years, not months. Oh, but I've had pastors tell me, oh, but you can't judge repentance. They had the thief on the cross. That's always where people go to when they want to avoid this conversation. Well, the thief on the cross, Jesus said, I'll remember you today in paradise. No, the thief said, would you remember me? And he goes, today we will be together in paradise. And it's like, that is the outlier. That's not the rule, right? You can come to Jesus at any point. Absolutely true. God is so, so gracious. But in the lives of people that we're sitting with and counseling, we must give the right counsel so that victims are not further victimized. It looks like actual change. Jesus said that we must bear fruit in keeping with repentance. So don't fall for tears and flowers and promises. Watch their actions. We must get this right. Expect abusers to have great reputations in the community, in the police department, in the Rotary Club, in the church. Expect them to have great reputations. As I shared earlier, the very first victim that I worked with after Stacy was an officer's wife, and he was Officer of the Year in our county. He had an untouchable reputation. I mean, he was talked about constantly. But behind closed doors, he was an absolute monster. He raped his wife daily at gunpoint for 10 years. His two favorite threats to her were that he would make what Drew Peterson did to his wives look like child's play. And then he would force her to go on walks in their local forest preserve, and he would point to the tree that he said that he was going to bury her under. How did this duplicitous man convince a county that he was a man full of integrity when he was nothing more than an ISIS-inspired terrorist in his own home? How did he do it? It's because he intentionally groomed an entire community to believe that he was good, so that he would be freed up to do great evil behind closed doors, and it works like a charm. Never assume that because you haven't been on the receiving end of evil, that evil is indeed not being perpetrated upon a victim. Never assume that your relationship to someone that someone says is an abuser, it's like, well, he was never that way to me. Yeah, no kidding. You're right, you're not married to him. Well, he's an elder in the church. Surely he wouldn't do that. Yeah, he would. He's a police officer. He's in the military. He's a pastor. Surely they wouldn't do these things. Oh, yes. Yes. Certain professions have higher percentages of abusers, and the ones that I just mentioned all do. Military is the highest. Police officers, pastors, first responders, there's quite a few abusers in those. Why is that? Because these are professions that tend to draw people in who like to have authority, or there's a perception of authority. And people that want to abuse are drawn like a moth to the fire, like the flame, to be a part of something that gives them perceived authority or real authority. It works so powerfully. You might be tempted to believe that you can't make any difference when evil runs this deep. It's really easy to get overwhelmed and think, what can I do then? This seems like too big for me. But you can, one person at a time, and you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be willing to adopt a few good practices. I'm going to end with this. 3 things. 1, believe her. Believe her. Such a simple gift. Believe her. I want you to remember this. Isolation and control is the game her abuser has played with her for a long time. She already thinks her voice doesn't matter, because he's told her that for years. She's deciding when she comes to you if she has any value whatsoever. Maybe you're tempted to think, well, people lie though. What if she's lying? So how can I believe her from the start? Okay, let's just be real about this. Do some people lie? Yes. It could happen. But statistically speaking, victims are far more likely to lie and say that they weren't abused than to say that they were abused. So if you start with belief, you're really safe, because roughly 2 to 8% lie. In my experience, it's closer to 2, which means that you're 98% likely to be standing on the side of truth by believing her. One woman told me with tremors and tears, many years earlier, she had gone to a priest and she started to share her abuse story. And she said, as soon as she sat down and mentioned abuse, he walked over and grabbed her by her arm. And as he walked her to the door of the church, he said, this must be your cross to bear. She looked at me and she said, today, I'm going to tell my story to you. And if for some reason you don't believe me, I'll never share this again with anyone in my life. And I felt the weight of that responsibility. Sometimes the greatest thing we can do is to validate a fellow struggler in this journey of life. When we believe victims, we're also telling them that God sees them too. We see them and we believe them, and God sees you and he believes you. and he's for you, and he's ready to stand with you. So believe her. The second thing I recommend is that you invite her to connect with safe people and professional local assistance. I want to highlight what I didn't say. I didn't say connect her with a safe church. Now let me explain. It's not at all because some churches aren't becoming safe, but because it's too risky to assume that from the leadership of the church to small groups and everyone else in the church that they're safe. So I'm never going to say to someone who says, hey, recommend a safe church. Well, I'm not going to do that because one person might be safe and another person might be a death sentence. But there will likely be some. It might be in a women's group that has trauma and abuse-informed leadership. It could be some women you know who have experienced abuse themselves and they've learned to help others. While community is good and it is essential, smaller numbers of safe people are far, far better. I can't underscore this enough. Professional help is essential. Without it, victims remain victims. If you aren't from around here like me, get to know your local shelters, learn from them, familiarize yourselves with the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which helps victims get the abuse crisis care that they need. It's very simple by text, 88788. You can remember that. Just remember a few numbers, 88788. That's how you can get help. Or if you still do phone calls, like very few of us do, 800-799-SAFE. That helps victims get connected to counseling and emergency housing and childcare, continuing education, and it's all specifically local to them. So wherever you are in the country, when you call that, they will help you connect with local resources. And finally, and I think this one's super important, help a victim tell her story. Help her tell her story. I don't have time to go into this fully, but there's such power that's reclaimed when victims tell their stories. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, they rarely have a moment to themselves because they've been controlled for so long. So they haven't had a chance often to write their stories down, and that's by design. So I would encourage you to use a free tool that came out of the Stacey Peterson case, and it's called the Evidentiary Affidavit of Abuse, and you can find it at documenttheabuse.com. I'm more convinced than ever that until more faith communities embrace the idea that any beliefs that actually matter will always lead to action, that we will never, ever create refuge for victims of abuse, nor will we ever create accountability for offenders. Our practice must come from real belief. In November of last year, while I was still on staff at my current church where I serve as a lay elder now, I was reached out to by Called to Peace Ministries. I had been on their podcast about a year earlier, and they said, hey, Neil, we keep thinking about you. We loved having you on the podcast, and we'd love it if you'd consider applying for this job that just opened up here. It's Director of Church Partnerships with us. Would you check it out and let me know? So I looked at the job description, and I'm just like, oh, wow, that kind of feels like that's for me. But I don't trust just myself, so I went to my wife. I'm like, Brandy, what do you think? And by the time she read through the job description, she was crying. She said, there's no job that's been made more for you than this. She said, let's see where it goes. So I accepted the position in January, and I started in February at Called to Peace Ministries as the Director of Church Partnerships. So I'm putting my belief into action. My goal is to help churches all over the world learn to respond well to abuse and walk with victims. And I believe that we are at a cultural tipping point. I keep using that phrase. That's what I just keep sensing and I keep seeing. I believe we're at a cultural tipping point in history where more and more churches are saying yes to this. But we have so much more to do. And I can tell you at Called to Peace, we have more desire and more capacity to help any churches that are looking to put things in place and learn to respond well to victims of abuse. So if your church is interested, don't hesitate and reach out. Let's choose today to become people like James, the brother of Jesus, who talked about putting faith into action. He challenged us. He said, He said, but someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. And then James responds, he says, show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. May we be people who show our faith by our deeds, and may we become increasingly safer as we learn to respond well to victims of domestic violence and coercive control. May God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Neil. Thank you so much for that. We were talking about having a possible Q&A. I think getting going a little later like we did. If anybody has any questions for him, we could save it for our panel, unless somebody had a very pressing question. Is there anybody? Okay, so write it down on one of those cards, slip it back in that basket, and we will make sure we get it asked. Thank you so much, Pastor Neil. We just appreciate your honesty in telling that story, and I know it was so hard for you to get through that time, but now to take this in such a beautiful way. We're very grateful you came. Okay, guys, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. There's lots of treats back there. Help yourself, use the restroom, get up, walk around, meet each other, mingle, and then we will be back here in about 10 minutes, and then we're going to get going with Jim Schmidt. Okay?
And you showed up and tell me, is he good? He's good. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? of it like radiant diamonds bursting inside us. We cannot contain. Your love will surely come find us like blazing wildfire, singing your name. God of mercy, sweet love of mine, I have surrendered to your design. May this offering stretch across the skies. These hallelujah
just let me control it. There you go. Unless you want to mute it yourself.
So to unmute, I just, test, test. Good.
Is it on now? It's on now. All right. Did everybody get your name into the door prize jar? Any last takers? Okay, we're going to draw for our first door prize, and we're going to have Pastor Neil draw a name out of our bucket. He's going to be fair. Lori Laddiser. Where is she? Oh, come on. Can you come up or can I come to you? Maybe. Yay. You want a prize. You want a prize. It is. I know. Okay, so you can pick, let's see. This is a coffee surprise. This one has a cool speaker in it. That one looks like a nice cup. So yeah, you just dig around and see what you want. Yep, that's a Coffee One Starbucks gift card in there. This has some good earbuds in it, and Amazon card. Want that one? All right. Thank you. Yeah, I got two there. That's okay. I was going to take two. All right, so Lori Laddiser won our first door prize. Congratulations, Lori. Okay. Do we have Jim ready to go? Jim's right there. All right. Okay. So now I have the absolute honor of introducing Mr. Jim Schmidt. So Jim, we met last year, and he is just doing absolutely such amazing things. So Jim's a seasoned fire service professional. He's got over 25 years of experience. He's having served as a fire captain, training officer, volunteer fire chief. So he has extensive expertise as an instructor, training specialist, and he's currently working on public relations and community risk reduction for the 4th largest fire department in the state of Florida. Jim holds a certificate in fire science and is pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Occupational Safety and Health at Columbia Southern University. So, in addition to his fire career, Jim and his family have become dedicated advocates for survivors of domestic violence following the tragic loss of their daughter, Gabby Petito, to domestic violence. Through the Gabby Petito Foundation, they work tirelessly to raise awareness, promote safety initiatives, and implement prevention education strategies to support those impacted by domestic violence. So Jim is going to share with us his story, his daughter's story, and it's titled, Every Link Matters. Gabby's story through a first responder's eyes in the urgent call for survivor-focused collaboration. So please welcome Mr. Jim Schmidt.
All right. Is it on? So I've gotten a little bit better with this whole traveling thing where I give myself extra time. I used to be like really rushed to do these things, like show up, the day before or the morning of, and then like leave right away and try to get home. And I'm so glad I got in here a little bit early because we spent, Pastor Logan, what was it, an hour and a half yesterday trying to get the presentation uploaded into their PC. And for whatever reason, I'm not a tech guy. My 12-year-old is my tech support, and she's not here. But we finally figured it out. But he's going to give me a little support in the back there. We have some video clips in there, so he's just going to have to cue those up when we get there. But I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank you all for having me here. It is an honor to be here with you all. And I'll give a little warning too, my accent, it's going to change a little bit. So I'm originally from New York, so you'll hear a New York accent come out. I can translate that. And, but I've been a transplant to Florida for the last few years, so there's a little bit of southernness in there too. Like I'm starting to say y'all instead of you guys and stuff like that. Apparently it's a little bit more appropriate. But it's an honor to be here. You guys have been absolutely amazing since I've been here. Everybody in the town has been so welcoming. It's been a little cold and a little windy. Is it always that way here? Like the wind hasn't stopped like since we've been here. I tried to play golf yesterday morning and I lost a lot of golf balls. But no, really it's an honor to be here. And thank you for the introduction. And we're going to go through some stuff today and talk about our experience with losing our daughter. Pastor Neil, I had to step out a little bit during yours because a lot of that stuff really hit hard for me because history repeats itself. And you're going to hear some of the same things from me here today, and you're probably going to hear it over and over again today. Some of the advocates in the room, you're going to already know a lot of this stuff. I know we have a mixed crowd, so I'm trying to blend a lot of things in here today to try to talk about our experience, our mission, our foundation, and just from my point of view with my career and the things that I experienced in my career and then in my personal life and what we're trying to do with it now to try to make a difference. It was working before? There we go. So I'm Jim Schmidt. I'm Gabby Petito's bonus dad. I don't like to use the word stepdad. I never called her my stepdaughter. She was always my oldest child. I'm a father, a husband. Been in the fire service for a really long time, both volunteer and career. I've held pretty much every position in there. I actually started in 911 dispatch while I was going through fire and EMT school. So I have that experience as well. And then all the way up and being a fire instructor going across the country teaching prior to all of this stuff. We have 4 kids. I've always been big on training and knowledge and education and learning. I believe that any knowledge learned and not passed on is knowledge wasted. And so that's kind of what led me here today. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. And there's 4 parents, and our story was very public. And a lot of you have either heard us speak before or seen it on TV or whatever. But I can tell you that each parent can come up here separately and tell the story, and it'll be slightly different because we all kind of see things through a different lens. And we're going to talk today about my lens and what I saw and what I experienced and what I went through. And it may be a little bit different than what you've seen publicly out there. So we're just going to have a couple of objectives today. I got to point it that way. Come on. Come on. So we're going to just describe the key moments and lessons learned from our daughter's case. There was a lot. There's a lot of lessons learned as a parent, as a first responder. We're going to recognize some of the critical roles emergency response agencies play in DV response. And that means everybody. That means right from 911 dispatch through our fire, EMS, all the way to law enforcement and hospital staff. We're going to identify breakdowns in communications or response to DV incidents. And we're going to apply trauma-informed and survivor-centered approaches. And trauma-informed, we're going to talk a little bit more because we hear that word a lot, but I think I found a real simple way to break that down. And hopefully develop some strategies on bringing everybody together. We're all about collaboration. We're all here, and we're all from different jobs, right? We have advocates in the room, we have nurses in the room, we have law enforcement in the room, people online. Everybody kind of comes from their different place, but we're all here for the same reason. And we all need to be working together and collaborating, otherwise this just isn't going to work. We need to break out of our silos, and we need to get together and make a big difference. Come on. So I always like to start out with a good origin story. You know, there's Superman, right? Spider-Man, all those good ones. So here's the origin story of me and my wife. We met when we were very young. We were both young EMTs together. And I had recently had a girlfriend break up with me on Valentine's Day. And so, yeah, it's a whole story. But anyway, not too long after that, a few days later, I'm down at the ambulance garage, just kind of hanging out, and this lady walks in the door. And from that moment on, I was like, wow, this is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. And so I started asking some questions around some of the friends, and like, oh, Nicole's a great woman. She's absolutely amazing. And some of the other people weren't so nice. They said, you know, she's got baggage. I'm like, what do you mean baggage? Like, she's like a bag lady? Like, she like walks around like collecting things? Like, what does that mean, a bag lady? Oh no, she's got a kid. You don't want that. Well, my mom's a single mom, and that's a real special thing. And I'm like, that's a pretty terrible thing to say about somebody. And so I finally worked up the courage. We started talking a little bit, getting to know each other, and finally one day we get like an ambulance call together, and we go on this call, and I'm like, I'm gonna make a great impression on her. This is gonna be it. I did not make a good first impression that day. Matter of fact, it was a really bad first impression. It was a call with this gentleman. He was very, very sick, and he was in his bathroom, and he was covered in poop. And I remember looking in the bathroom and looking at her, and I said, you have a young kid. You know how to handle this. I'm going to go talk to his wife and get some information. That didn't go over very well. Needless to say, she saw through all of that stuff, and eventually we started hanging out and dating, and I got to meet Gabby for the first time. She was 2, and we've now been married. We just had our 20th wedding anniversary. We've been together for like 24 years. I'm like her 5th child. She is absolutely an amazing woman. She is by far one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life. My children are so blessed to have her in their life. Before all this stuff, my wife was to sit on the couch, comfy sweats, shades drawn. You know, it's so dark in there, you probably grow mushrooms and just kind of watch a movie on TV, and she wasn't very outgoing. And through all of this that's gone on, I've watched her grow into one of the strongest, confident, most resilient people I've ever seen in my life. And I'm in absolute awe every time I see her out. When she stands in front of the Conference on Crimes Against Women in front of thousands of people and delivers a keynote, I just sit back with a smile ear to ear. It's terrible the reasons why and why we're there, but to see that growth in her was absolutely amazing. And she's my hero. Absolutely my hero. I want to give you guys a little forewarning today. There's going to be some moments where I get a little choked up. And I don't know where it's going to happen. It's called being vulnerable. It's not something men really know how to do. It's not something I knew how to do in my previous profession. But I know how to do it now, and I know it's okay. So bear with me if those moments happen, and we'll work through them together. Come on. Pastor Logan. There we go. So who is Gabby? As I mentioned, my wife is a single mom. You know, she was dating Joe, Gabby's father, and they were young parents. They had Gabby. They realized that it wasn't going to work out, and they split up amicably. They were engaged, never married, and I came into Nikki's life and Gabby's life when she was 2. And I remember seeing her for the first time, this little bright-eyed, blue-eyed girl, blonde hair, just like these chubby cheeks, and she was the most amazing little girl I've ever seen in my life. That solidified me wanting to marry my wife, seeing how she was as a mother, realizing how amazing Gabby was, and just watching her grow. And like I said, she was my first child. She was just full of life, full of energy, amazing and talented at everything she did. I mean, just when she put her mind to something, it was absolutely beautiful. She was a fantastic artist. She had a vision in her head, and then she can take that and put it to a piece of paper or a canvas or whatever it was she was working on. And it was absolutely amazing to watch. And to see her go through the years and be the big sister, like I said, we have 3 other children. She has 2 siblings on her dad's side, and just really being that strong big sister that always looked out for her brothers and sisters. And they really looked up to her too. They loved her immensely. And then seeing her graduate high school and then become an adult, you know, that's always pretty scary. You know, I remember as a kid growing up, I couldn't wait to get out of the house. And then I got out there and I was like, man, this is a pretty scary world out here. So a little scared for her, but excited to see her coming into her own and growing up and starting to do things and being an adult. And it was just so proud of her to see what she was doing and her vision and her plans to travel. She was adventurous. She wanted to see the world. And gosh, she was seeing places that I only dreamed I would go to. Most people would dream that they would go to. Typically when you retire and you hope that you're physically able to do it. She was doing it when she was young and able. And man, it was inspiring to see. It really was. She was just an amazing person. This is her with her siblings, with us, and I can't think of one single picture of her that she's not smiling. She never took a bad picture. She was just that type of person. She was just absolutely amazing. Come on up. So she goes on this trip. She meets this guy, Brian. They went to high school together. They kind of went their separate ways after high school, got reconnected. She moved down to Florida with him, and they decided they're going to take this cross-country trip. We were excited for her, nervous, scared. She was sending photos and calling, posting on social media, starting her blog page. And on August 12th, I'm working in the firehouse one day, and I get a phone call from my wife, and she said something happened. There was an incident. Gabby's in Utah. Something happened with her and Brian. The police stopped. I don't really know the details. They're going to give her like a ticket or something. So I'm thinking, I don't know, it's speeding or whatever. I'm on a call. I can't really. I'm like, listen, I'll call you when I get done. And she's like, just see me when you get home. And we spoke to Gabby that night. She really downplayed it. She did what most victims do. It was my fault. It was a misunderstanding. We had an argument. I had a bad day. I was going to get a ticket, but they didn't give me a ticket. And it's fine. Everything is fine. And just convincing us that everything was good. I don't know why I didn't give it a second thought after that. I trusted my daughter. She's an adult. She's on an adventure. She's with the person she loves and trusts. We knew him. We thought we knew him. We didn't know him. Didn't know him at all. They continue on their adventure. They move up into Wyoming. Messages stop. Social media posts stop. Trying to reach her, can't get a hold of her. My wife received a couple of text messages, didn't seem right. Didn't seem like her, just some words in there that wasn't her normal texting. Calling back and forth, trying to get a hold of Brian's parents too, and we're worried about the kids. Not just her, we're worried about the kids. Something's not right, no answer, no response. We're now into September. My wife spent, I think, 3 days trying to report her missing. I don't know if you've ever tried to report somebody missing, it's not easy, especially when they're traveling. She called out to Utah, she remembers they were in Utah. They said, nope, you gotta report her for where she lives. Well, she's from Florida. We called Florida. Nope, got her called to the last known location. Well, the last known location was here. Tries the Parks Police. Nope, you got to report it from where you are. New York. Nope, you got to. It's just back and forth like a pinball. Finally, she threw herself on the floor of a police precinct in New York. A female detective, and she took the report. Got a hold of the police down in Florida. We found out Brian was home. Brian was home with Gabby's van. She's not there, and they said contact our lawyer. I'll go back a second. That was on September 11th of 2021. That day, I didn't go into a dad mode. I didn't go into dad mode that day. I went into my training, my experience as a fire officer, and I went into first responder mode. And I said, I'm going to go out. She shared her apps with me. I knew her hiking apps. I knew her camping style. And I said, I'm going to go find our daughter, and I'm going to bring her home no matter what. No matter the circumstances, no matter where she is, I'm going to bring her home. Now, deep down, I'm running scenarios through my head. I'm not telling my wife this. I'm not trying to upset her. I'm not telling her dad, stepmom, my kids. I'm keeping it all inside. I'm doing what first responders do. We run these scenarios. We think about these things. I'm packing my bag. I'm putting everything in there that I need to do, and off I went. And I took with me 20 years of unresolved vicarious trauma with me that I thought would prepare me for any moment in my life that I could handle this and it would all be okay. And I went out there and I met with the police and I started doing my searching and I pulled maps out, doing what I had to do. And while I'm out there, I get a phone call one day from a reporter. Come on. Moab Police Department is going to release some body cam footage about an incident your daughter had in August. And so our family saw what really occurred on August 12th, just as the rest of the world did, which was far different from the story we were told, from what we knew. Far different. She's missing, and now we see this. Come on. Come on. Oh, go on. There it is. Nope, nope, nope. And this comes out. Pastor, I'm going to ask you to cue that up. I only got a couple of little clips from this.
Grant County Sheriff's Office.
Were you able to get a description of these documents?
Hi, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, I'm right on the corner of Main Street by Moonflower, and we're driving by, and I'd like to report a domestic dispute. Florida with the white van, Florida license plate, white land, gentleman.
Where's it at?
5'6" beard. They just drove off. They're going down Main Street. They made a right onto Main Street from Moonflower.
Or what were they doing?
Cooperative, but what'd you say?
What were they doing?
We drove by, and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
Okay, you said it's a white van?
White van. I give you the license plate. Just give me 1 sec. I took a picture of it.
What kind of white van? Like a big one?
It was a smaller van with the license plate of, it was white, Florida license plate QFT G03. The make was a Ford, model was Transit, black ladder on the passenger side.
Black ladder, passenger side,
White Ford Transit.
white Ford Transit. Okay, what's your name? And where did so they headed south on Main Street from Moonflower Market?
Correct. They made the right turn.
Oh, so they went north.
North. Yeah, sorry, I'm not from around here.
Okay, you're right there by the post office?
Right across the street, yep.
Okay, and when they turned onto Main Street, they went right or left?
Right.
Right, so they went north. North on Main. All right, I will let somebody know. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Bye.
My law enforcement in the room. That's a pretty good picture of what's going on, would you say? Really painted a good picture. I mean, if there's any 911 dispatchers out there, you pray that these are your callers every time, that this is the information that you're getting. That's not the story that was told to us that day. You see images like this, and we know it was far worse than what we knew. This body cam footage has been studied. It's being used by law enforcement all across the country. I just did a session at the Conference on Crimes Against Women with an awesome law enforcement expert, friend of Mark and I's, Dave Thomas, on predominant aggressor, on this, on how a victim behaves versus how the perpetrator behaves. Now, there's a lot of things that came out of this, things that we didn't even realize at the time, and I don't think when I saw this for the first time, that even at that moment that I realized that this was domestic violence. I don't think that really clicked in my head. Before all this, I thought domestic violence was a husband and a wife. You know, the husband slaps the wife or whatever. It happens in a household. And, you know, that's it. Really had no idea. I look at things like this. I screenshotted these. We'll talk about this a little bit later. When she said he grabbed my face. Where's her hand? Right around here. That to me looks like impeded breathing, choking, strangulation, suffocation. It was studied. Domestic violence experts will tell you that probably during this incident she was strangled. We'll never know. They never really dove into this. This was a very serious incident. This was released on September 16th. Here's one more clip out of here. And I don't want to play the whole thing. I'm just going to play this little clip.
How far do you want to go with this? Like, you know why the domestic assault code is there. It's there to protect people, especially, the reason why they don't give us discretion on these things is because too many times women who are at risk want to go back to their abuser, they just wanted him to stop, and they don't want to have to be separated, they don't want him charged, they don't want him to go to jail, and then they end up getting worse and worse treatment, and then they end up getting killed. Mm-hmm.
What happened to Gabby? Did we predict her outcome? We certainly did. Pastor, could you just click me off that? It certainly did. This incident, when we were in Dallas at that conference, unbeknownst to us, in one of the sessions we were doing, they were advocates from Moab. Their agency was contacted that day. They were asked for funds for Brian because on that day, our daughter was determined to be the primary aggressor. Today, that day. I know Mark will tell you it doesn't work that way, right? You're not the bully in the schoolyard 7 days a week, and then on the 8th day when your victim fights back, all of a sudden they're the bully and you're the victim. But they predicted it. They used domestic violence funds to put Brian up in a shelter that day, but they never put an advocate on the phone. And one of those advocates was in the room in that training session in tears. Because they said if they were on the phone, within 30 seconds they would have realized what was going on that day. And they felt that Gabby would be alive today. And that's something we just found out. And that was something that I didn't even think of. 3 days later, we found Gabby. September 19th. It's about 11 a.m. in the morning. I was asked to do an interview, which I'm not big on that stuff, but I was like, I'll do the interview. My phone was ringing off the hook from my FBI advocate, asking questions. They found certain things. And then around 11 a.m., said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm about half a mile from the hotel. You need to get back there right now." I said, "Okay." Go back to the hotel. I could see the street from the room I was sitting in, and I saw 2 black SUVs pull up, lights and sirens, and jump the curb. 2 people get out, one of them my victim advocate, the other one was Special Agent Charlie Jones, an amazing human being. And they came in, they asked me to sit down, and said, "We found remains consistent with your daughter. There's a news helicopter overhead in a restricted space. It's on film. We need you to call home to your family and tell them before they find out from the news." And I said, what does remains consistent mean? What does that mean? I said, "You're telling me to make a call. What does that mean?" He said, "Well, we think it's her, but we won't know until we do a forensic autopsy. And we have to bring in potentially specialists from Denver or from out of state." "How long does that take?" "Well, she could be in this autopsy for weeks. Could be months. We've got to send stuff out." "You're telling me I have to make the most important phone call in my life, but there is possibly a chance it's not her?" I'm like, "You do realize there's another girl missing that looks just like her. What if it's her and not our daughter?" Charlie said, "Hold on." Makes a quick phone call. Comes back. Said, "Jim, I'm going to show you some pictures. I don't want to, but I'm going to show you. If you can identify something, it would help." It was her. It was my daughter, our daughter. Discarded in the wild. And I made that phone call. Called my wife, said, "You got to get Joe and Tara on the phone. Got to do a conference call." I made the worst call of my life. Worst call of my life. My daughter had been alone in the woods for weeks. And I told my family I'd bring her home no matter what. And then I was told, you can't take her home. Can't take her home yet. I said, I'll camp outside the morgue. I don't care. She's not staying alone anymore. They said, Jim, you can't be here. You need to go home to your family. A few days later, after they found her, I reluctantly left and went home, feeling like a complete failure. That day, I felt like I failed my daughter as a father. I'm not getting into gender roles or anything like that, but there's one thing ingrained in you as a father, and it's to protect. Protect your wife, protect your children. And I felt like that day I failed to protect her. I feel like I failed as a first responder in my mission because I wasn't bringing her home. And we went home and we had a funeral for our daughter without her body. And we had to go back later and bring her home. Her cause of death was manual strangulation and some blunt force trauma to the back of the head. What the heck does that mean? How does that happen? A lot of things changed in our lives that day. A lot of things changed. So when things started to settle down, not knowing what to do, filled with so many emotions on how could this happen? How does this happen? My wife said, I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to start a foundation. I don't know what that means, but I feel like we got to do something. So we started the Gabby Petito Foundation in honor of our daughter. Now, our daughter had worldwide attention, news media coverage, Netflix series, all sorts of stuff. And we had no idea why. Like, why Gabby? Why did this happen to her? And why does she get so much attention and so many other people don't? We realized that Gabby's voice was gone, taken, but her story had a huge impact. And we had to continue to tell her story. So our foundation does two things. We work with trying to advocate for missing persons and assist missing persons organizations, and we work with domestic violence organizations and collaborate. Initially, we started with just kind of financially supporting them, and then we realized we need to do more than that. We realized how big this domestic violence problem is worldwide. And how do we stop it? Prevention and education. There's so much put into so many of the services that are necessary, but they're reactive. Hotlines, shelter services, legal support, financial support, whatever it may be. They're all reactive to something that already happened. But if we can do some prevention and education, maybe we can reduce the demand on those services. Maybe we can prevent future Gabbies. We turned the same social media pages that we use to try to find her into missing persons pages and advocacy pages, and we had no idea of the impact that it was going to have, just how much Gabby had. And I could tell you, but I'm going to let some other people tell you just on how much Gabby's story helped them.
Gabby Petito has definitely saved my life and changed my life in so many ways. When I saw the body cam footage, that definitely pushed me to be like, okay, this is not normal. I moved to an island with a man who abused me for 1.5 years, away from my family. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't know anyone when I left. But because of Gabby's story, I was able to leave and I was able to go find help. I was able to get therapy and I was able to heal. And I have now been out of my abusive relationship for 1 whole year. And I wholeheartedly believe that is because of Gabby Petito's story.
In August of 2021, I was maybe 3 to 4 months out from leaving a very abusive relationship. I remember seeing the news about Gabby being missing. Watching what unfolded from that point on truthfully changed my life. It opened my eyes and it reiterated to me that I could not ever go back to the relationship that I had just left. I endured a lot of things, I think, very similar to what Gabby did. I would like to ask and to tell her parents, thank you. Thank you so much for advocating for her. Thank you for advocating for other domestic violence victims. Thank you for never giving up on her.
Before Gabby went missing, I was strangled on my own bed by my ex-boyfriend. Because of stories like Gabby's, I was able to get away, and now I live a wonderful, beautiful life, all thanks to her and her story.
Gabby's story changed my life because after 3 years of emotional and physical abuse, I realized that I needed to leave before it was too late.
Her story made me realize what could happen if I didn't get out myself. It gave me the strength to get out. It gave me the strength to leave. It gave me the strength to say this is not okay. And she lives on through who she's helping. I know there's other stories like me, and I know her story will live on. And I know she lives on through everybody she's helped, and everybody she will continue to help.
Gabby's story has changed my life in more ways than one. And because of Gabby's documentary, I have committed to being an advocate for domestic violence and not just a victim.
Gabby Petito saved my life. Around the time that Gabby's story hit the news, I was in an abusive relationship that I had already had some unsuccessful attempts at leaving. I saw myself in Gabby, the way in the body cam footage, how she was crying inconsolable and he was calm, cool, laughing. You know, I had been in that same situation. Her demeanor and her in the body cam footage broke my heart because I have been there. I have been the one, you know, crying and blaming myself when it wasn't my fault at all, just like that wasn't Gabby's fault at all. I really strongly believe that if I did not leave around the time that Gabby's story was going public, his abuse would have escalated to physical and he would have hurt me and or killed me if I had stayed long enough.
Gabby saved my life. I watched every video of her I could find, and I saw myself in her. She was so beautiful, adventurous. She seemed so happy and free. Gabby and I are connected in a way that no one should be connected. Gabby saved so many lives, and if it wasn't for her, I would not be here today.
Gabby has given me strength, even though I did not know her. Gabby has given me strength. She has given me the confidence to speak up against the domestic violence. And if I could ever meet Gabby, or if I could ever see her for one day, I just want to give her a hug and just say, I'm sorry that you passed in such a tragic way, but I want to thank you for giving me my voice and giving me strength, and I will do everything that I could possibly do to make sure that your voice isn't forgotten.
Gabby has done work beyond to help save others like me, because that story sure woke me up. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not grateful that I am alive and my kids are safe. So I am grateful that Gabby, in one way or another, helped me wake up and save not only my life, but my kids. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you all, and so grateful to Gabby. I am so sorry for what happened to her. Let's continue her honor and continuing her work.
Gabby's father was invited on a podcast like 2 or 3 months ago, and the podcaster surprised Joe with these videos. He had scoured the internet and found them. And that was just a few clips. The full video runs almost an hour with different women, and the impact Gabby's story had on them. Now, working in the fire service for all the years that I did, I certainly responded to calls to violence over the years, and you see it. But that doesn't happen to people like us, right? This doesn't happen to people like me. That was pretty ignorant of me to think that. I can't tell you why our daughter was taken. Still don't understand it. But maybe the Lord has a different plan for people in life. Maybe some people are meant to do more beyond than they can on this earth. It's a hard thing to think about, but sometimes that's all I can rationalize in my head, that the sacrifice of our daughter saved maybe 1, 10, 100. But we receive these stories from all across the country. And so we're going to keep fighting for as long as we can. We're helpers. It's in our DNA. I couldn't lay my head down on the pillow at night if we didn't do something. Because her death can't be in vain. He may have taken her life, but he never diminished her light. It's still shining brighter than ever. And we're going to keep shining that light to help others for as long as we can. I just mentioned that this doesn't happen to people like us. Well, it does. I told you I'm a lifelong student. Educate myself. Started this foundation. We got into two really big topics. Very, very involved. Not fully understanding just how deep they go. So we educated ourselves. Took DV 101, we took all sorts of training. I'm going to tell you some of the things that we learned on our way. Come on. Pastor Logan, help me. Hey, come on. There it is. So that incident in Moab, and then him taking her life on August 27th, that didn't just happen. It doesn't just happen that way. We have the ability now to look back on it. Hindsight's 20/20, right? You don't know what you don't know, but once you know it, you see it. We learned about red flags of domestic violence. Love bombing, quick attachment. Well, they were friends in high school, then they separated. You know, they went their own ways and they came back together. It was too good to be true. Swept her off her feet. Moved really, really fast. Started lavishing her with these crazy gifts. That wasn't Gabby. I remember my wife telling Brian, like, you don't have to buy her stuff, but she likes it. Gabby was a simple girl. She was jeans and Vans shoes or whatever. She wasn't into designer gifts, but he liked to get that stuff for her. Quick commitment. Right away, we need to get married. Got engaged right away, didn't have a ring. Isolation. My family's moving to Florida. Why don't you come and move with me? They went down to Florida together. She got a job. She worked, first job, it was right around COVID time. She was working at Taco Bell. She loved that job. She would tell people to have a taco-tastic day. And I think they'd look at her sideways. But she loved it. And she had some good friends there. He didn't like that. Why don't you come work with me at Publix at the grocery store? We have an opening. So she did. You know, you're leasing your car. We're paying money. We work in the same place. I can drive you to work. So she got rid of her car. Now she's completely dependent on him. And he was doing other stuff. Blame shifting, the jealousy, the possessiveness, the gaslighting, control over her daily life. We saw that really late after the fact because we got to see the text messages between the two, and we got to see that much, much later on. The intimidation, the blame shifting, the jealousy. We think another piece of the isolation was she had some good friends down in Florida that I think was starting to realize what was going on. Now, they were talking about this trip for forever, but suddenly, we should go now. Isolated her from her friends. These are all just some of the red flags we came across. And it's something so common. It's a pattern. It's like there's a playbook that's used. And this was his playbook. We learned about the power and control wheel, the Duluth model. We learned that it's not all physical, psychological, it's financial, sexual abuse, digital, stalking, all of these things. All of these things were going on with her. The isolation, emotional abuse. It's about power and control. It's about maintaining and gaining power and control over one person. It's what it's all about. He just couldn't let anybody else have her. He just had to have that control. We learn about the cycle of violence, the tension building, the victim's response to that, what the batterer does. And advocates in the room, I know you know a lot of this stuff. And then that acute explosion. And one thing that was pointed out to me, Dave Thomas pointed it out to me when we were doing that class in Dallas, was that abusers are really good at hiding it, right? You heard that this morning from the pastor. Really good at hiding it, man. They're a great guy or a great person, a pillar of the community. So the fact that Brian, I don't know, getting too close to the speaker. The fact that Brian had a public outburst tells me he was losing control. And as Dave put it, that makes him one of the most dangerous abusers, unbeknownst to us. And that honeymoon stage, and this cycle just goes around and around. So they break down every piece of you, make you feel you're crazy, or that you need them, or it's not going to happen again. We had no idea. No idea. We learned 70% of domestic violence homicides occur after a survivor tries to leave a relationship. We believe Gabby was done. We believe that she was ready to leave. And he just couldn't let her live. Couldn't let anybody else have her. So why don't they just leave? I heard it this morning. Why don't they leave? Fear of retaliation, financial dependence, could be cultural or religious. Hope the partner will change. Lack of resources or support. I couldn't tell you who to call before this. I didn't know there was a national hotline or there was local services. I couldn't tell somebody where to go. I know she felt trapped. I was talking to a survivor one day who was strangled by her husband at the time, and she had called 911, and they responded. They did a lethality assessment on her. And she said when she was answering those questions in that moment, she felt like she was answering for two separate people. The husband that she loves and marries and wants to have a family with, and the monster that's causing all this harm to her. And she didn't even realize at that moment that it was the same person. Even after he was arrested, it took her weeks to realize, no, that was the same person. That is the person I married. That survivor now is about 3.5 years out of that relationship, and she's fled to 7 different states across the country waiting for this to go to trial in fear of him. That's why they don't leave. Come on. But I'll let these women tell you. If you haven't seen this video, this is a really good video. I know Mark has seen it. And this was put out by the National Domestic Violence Hotline. It's about 7 minutes. But instead of me telling you, let them tell you why they didn't leave. And maybe we'll get a better understanding why.
It is the question that I'm asked the most. Why did I stay? Why does any woman stay? And for the life of me, I can't understand why people are obsessed with it, because to me it's so obvious. Why does anybody stay with somebody that they love? You know, we've all been in relationships that, even if they weren't abusive, we're not working any longer, and we all stay far longer than we want. And you stay for the same reasons. You stay because you love the person, or you love what you used to have, or you're trying to take care of your children.
When we ask, why did you stay, we're blaming the victim for their abuse, as opposed to asking, why did you hit this person? Or why are you violent? Or why do you feel the need to be violent?
Why would somebody abuse? Why would somebody beat the people who love him or her most on earth? Until we ask that question, we won't be able to obliterate domestic violence. We have got to focus on the perpetrators of violence, not the victims.
It's cliche, but he really was Prince Charming. He was very kind and sweet and nice. I left what I was doing to come and be with him, and I was alone with him. I didn't have any friends or family in the area. I couldn't find a job, so he paid the bills. And so we got into an argument, and that's the first time that he hit me. He actually threw me up against the wall and started to choke me. And I didn't really understand what was happening because he was not that person all this time. And so when he finally let me go, I thought it was something I did. You know, I wasn't thinking to run. After we got married, it didn't stop. It just got worse and worse and worse. And I felt like I was trapped. At that point, we had moved from where we were across the country again, and I was further isolated. I didn't have any friends or family, and essentially he still was the breadwinner. I was dependent on him. So if I left, what was I gonna do? Where was I gonna go? You know, how was I gonna take care of myself? I felt like no one would understand, and I felt like no one would care.
The first full-out physical attack was 5 days before the wedding. Part of me knew I had to leave him right then, that I couldn't marry somebody who had done this. But then this other part of me said, but wait, it was one time. And I told myself he'd never do it again, that I was sure he was very sorry, and I didn't leave. I married him.
You stayed with this guy.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. I mean, he told me, and I absolutely, you know, that's the part that always, it's so interesting to me. It's like, you know, the standard question, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave? Well, he was trained by the United States Marine Corps to hunt people down and kill them, and he told me if I left, he would hunt me down and kill me. That's why I didn't leave. I used to pull what he would call my disappearing acts, and that would be, I would, you know, get the boys and get out, because it just was getting too intense. But I would always go back because at least I knew where he was. At least I knew the routine, I knew what to expect. But, you know, it's a terrible way to live, to always be looking over your shoulder. He didn't start out with being abusive. He started out with being incredibly sweet and incredibly attentive and incredibly thoughtful and incredibly kind and saying things to me that no one had ever said and paying attention to me in ways that no one ever had. You know, and I was really taken by it.
One of the reasons why we stay is because the behavior is such a drastic change from the person we met in the beginning. And we're constantly looking for the man in the beginning instead of concentrating on the man that is in front of us. Once I understood that, then I made the decision, you know, I gotta go. This is not the same man I married. I mean, I love him, but he's gonna kill me.
With every violent moment, I felt further connected to him in this kind of twisted way. I felt that, you know, we had this secret that bound us together and that this was something big and we were working on it, and so we had to stay together until we worked it out. The violence got to a point where I realized that I could die. I had to create a plan. I had to figure out where I was gonna go and how I was gonna get there and who I was gonna reach out to for help if there was any. I was scared. I was afraid that he would find me. I was afraid that he would be so angry that I left, that he would come after me. I couldn't just get up and walk away.
And it was the most terrible feeling to know that I could leave and I still couldn't leave because I was bound by this psychological trap that I thought was love, that wasn't love. You know, I had so much denial. If you had come to me and said, are you being physically abused? You know, if my doctor had asked me or a best friend, I would have said, no, I'm not being physically abused.
You do feel isolated and you keep a lot of secrets. You know, you keep a lot of secrets in your heart, in your home, in your head. I stayed because I believed him when he said he wasn't gonna do it again. I stayed because I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have any money. I didn't have access to any resources. I stayed because my religious community convinced me that I couldn't get divorced because God would hate me. I stayed because I loved him. You know, I stayed because he was the love of my life, and I wanted to believe that love could conquer all, including abuse.
Sometimes it's just easier to hear it from the people that have experienced it firsthand. I've had the opportunity to meet with and become friends with most of the women up there. Shouldn't have had to meet them the way we did. I'm sure in another way we probably would have been friends along the way. But what they've experienced and endured in their life, and to see the work that they do is inspiring. And they're amazing people, and they've been a huge support for us. And I learned a lot about them, and I really respect them, and no truer words could be stated. And those are all the reasons why they don't leave. And we got to stop asking that question, because it's not that easy. Pastor said earlier, the question should be, why do you abuse? Why do you choose to do that? If you love and care for somebody, why do you choose to do that? Love isn't supposed to hurt, right? Love is supposed to be comforting, nurturing, supportive. It's not supposed to hurt. People ask us all the time, well, how come Gabby just didn't leave? Probably for all those reasons. And when she wanted to, that's when he ended her life. We kept diving deeper and deeper into this. I mean, you can really go down a rabbit hole when you get into the domestic violence world. And I started to learn about strangulation. Started taking classes and learning a lot about it. Realizing that when he strangled our daughter to death, it probably wasn't the first time. We found out later on from a friend of Gabby's that it wasn't. He actually enjoyed to do it during sex as well. And that's something really hard to hear as a father. I'd like to think all of my daughters are completely 100 celibate, celibacy all the way through, and, whatever. And my wife, life didn't exist before me. You like to think that, right? That's just not the reality, but he enjoyed it. She just went along with it because he liked it. She was probably strangled on the day before that in Moab. It wasn't his first time. I realized that strangulation is really an in-depth topic, and something that I talk about a lot more now. Come on. So what is it? It's the ultimate means to gain and maintain power and control over one individual. It's not normal. It's not self-defense. And it's attempted murder by restricting blood flow or oxygen to somebody's brain. Now, we need oxygen and blood flow in general, but there's one organ in our body that really, really needs it, and that's our brain. And in my opinion, it's attempted murder. You can't even consent to it for sex, because you can't consent to something that can kill you. And every time somebody places their hands on someone else's neck, they're causing irreversible damage to that person. We'll talk about that. Strangulation is a key lethality factor. It's been studied all across the country. If an intimate partner puts their hands on your neck even one time, you're at a 750% higher chance of being murdered by them. It's not a matter of if, it's when. They're some of the most dangerous people that walk the face of the earth, not just to their victims, but for my law enforcement in the room. I think the number's somewhere around 40% or so, Mark? About 40% or so is the number, I believe. Perpetrators who kill law enforcement in the line of duty have a prior history of strangulation. It is a felony in all 50 states, and less than 90% of the people ever charged with felony strangulation are convicted of it. It's downgraded. misdemeanor assault and battery, probation, and then they go back out onto the street. Mass shooters, history of strangulation typically. Less than 50% of the people, the victims that they strangle, have an external mark on their body. That's why they love it. That's why they like to do it. Causes brain damage, and a lot of the fatal symptoms are delayed. And as I mentioned, it increases that risk of homicide. I think I'm going to skip this video. Yeah, let's skip that video. So we learned about the psychological consequences of strangulation and just how quickly applying pressure can cause harm. 5 to 10 seconds, you can go unconscious. Within 14 seconds, you can have a seizure from anoxia. That's a lack of oxygen to the brain where you start having seizure-like activity. Right around 10 to 30 seconds, you start to have what's called petechiae hemorrhaging. Those are little red dots, kind of looks like acne. Those are little blood vessels rupturing. Typically, you'll see them in the face, sometimes in the hairline, the eyes. Those are indications of pressure building up in the head. In about 30 seconds, you lose bowel control. In about a minute, you stop breathing. And typically around 2 minutes or so, a little longer, you're done. This is from the Strangulation Institute on Strangulation Prevention out of San Diego. They have a lot of great information. They have these assessment cards for first responders, signs and symptoms to look for, things to do. These are things I never knew as a first responder. A lot of times the victim will say, I was choked. You weren't choked. You were strangled. Choking would be, I'm eating one of those delicious donuts in the back and I get really excited and it goes down the wrong way and now I have a foreign body airway obstruction. That's choking. Strangulation is serious. Some of the delayed underlying effects that we learned about, carotid dissections. You have 2 arteries that pump oxygenated blood to your brain. Your carotid arteries right here. You can suffer a dissection where one of those rupture, or there's a clot in there that breaks off. You can have a stroke, traumatic brain injury, blood clots, respiratory issues, it goes on and on. Some of these signs and symptoms might not even show for days, weeks, months later. This is serious stuff. I had no idea. No idea. People who are strangled need to be transported to the hospital, and this is where my ER nurses come in handy. This is where my paramedics and firefighters, this is where my law enforcement, this is where my 911 dispatchers, this is where you all come in and play a key role in this, is being able to identify this, understand this, know how dangerous it is, and get them to a hospital. They need a CTA scan. So that scan is with some contrast, with some dye, and that will tell them if there's something going on. And if it's something that's found early on, if they are found to have a carotid dissection or something, it could be an easy treatment like giving them aspirin for 6 months to a year to make sure those clots break up. They need to go to the hospital. They need to have their airway checked. They need to go and get checked out. This is why they strangle. Dr. Scott Hampton is an amazing person. I had a chance to work with him. He works with abusers. And these are some of the quotes when he asked them, why did you strangle? Did you know that you can come this close to killing her and not leave a trace of evidence? How's that for the perfect crime? We call it the Witness Prevention Program. "35% of the injuries are too minor to photograph. You may never see an external mark on them. Maybe it's so faint or it doesn't look like anything." Come on. And less than 3% of them seek medical attention. This is serious stuff. And yet they're not getting the medical attention they deserve. So as we went further and further into this, recognize there's a lot of gaps in the system, right? I think we could all admit that. There's a lot of gaps. I'm about bridging those gaps, overcoming them, and stopping those obstacles. So I started training our first responders. It's the world I came from. It's the world I know. When we got into this, I said, I'm going to do missing persons. I said a man shouldn't be talking about domestic violence. Now, I'm married for 20 years, together for almost 25. And I've been wrong a lot of times in my life. I mean, trust me, even when I'm right, I think I'm still wrong. You just have to ask my wife. And I was told by a domestic violence expert, you couldn't be more wrong. We need more men to talk about this. So I was trying to figure out, how do I bridge the world I came from, the world I knew and loved, and now this world that I've been thrown into. And I couldn't figure out how to put this all together. Couldn't figure this out. I know I'm really, really good at this, and I'm really just starting to learn about that. But I found if you're passionate about something, then you can make it work. And then it clicked one day. We had a civil case against the family. We never got our day in court criminally because Brian took his own life. And any charges they may or may not have been pursuing against the parents for their part in it were no longer being pursued because Gabby was deceased and Brian was deceased. And so they weren't going to put that time and energy. And I was probably one of those people that, for the longest time, when you see, a civil case come up, you're like, wow, these people are just looking for money. No. Sometimes it's the only form of justice you might be able to get. And so we had a civil case against the parents, and throughout my career, I've had a few depositions related to my job for calls I've gone on, so I kind of understand the tactics of the attorneys. I know what to expect. I know those leading questions. And when I sat down that day and I was being deposed by their attorney, he starts off very nice, and then he starts pressing on my experience as a firefighter. Tell me about your experience. How long have you done this? What are your certificates? What do you have? Well, I'm a firefighter this, I'm a certified fire officer, nationally fire instructor, blah, blah, blah. Oh, wow, and you're an EMT, yep, so you respond to medical calls, yep. So you've responded to domestic violence calls in the past? I said, yeah, probably. Well, tell me about some of them. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, so you've had training in domestic violence since you respond to these calls. And I sat there for a minute, and I said, no. He's like, how could that be? You just told me all these certificates you have for all this stuff that you do. You respond to these calls, you have zero training. I said, yeah. I said, as a matter of fact, my EMT book is about 800 pages, and there's like 2 paragraphs in it that talk about domestic violence. And they don't cover it. They don't go over it because there's not a single question on the test about it. So I have zero training. And then I could see him fumbling through his notes because I derailed him. Right there, I derailed him. He was trying to say, you should have known, you should have seen. I went home that night. There's a lot of things that keep me up at night. A lot of things that keep me up at night. But I started thinking back in my career and realizing I'm not going to sit up here and tell you I did everything perfect in my career. Some calls I responded on came back in my head, and I realized I unintentionally failed some of the patients I responded to, not realizing that they were a domestic violence victim at that moment. That I had the ability to help them and guide them in a crucial moment. That I spent over 20 years in my career educating myself so I never, ever came across anything that I wouldn't know what to do or who to call. And yet, I did it for these folks. So I started doing research. I came across a lot of stuff, and I came across this story. This is Lieutenant Brenda Cowan of the Lexington, Kentucky Fire Department. She was the first black female firefighter in Lexington, Kentucky, and the first black female lieutenant. Lieutenant Cowan was killed in the line of duty in February 2004, responding to a domestic violence incident. She was shot and killed. And there was a lot of things that go on. And in the fire service, when one of us dies in the line of duty, there's a lot of these reports that come out. And it's lessons learned. It's not to place blame, but it's to make sure this never happens again. This was over 20 years ago. And what came out of Brenda's case was, in her NIOSH report, was developing SOPs for responding to violent situations, integrated emergency communication. They had no idea that the shooter was still on scene, who had already taken the life of his wife. The police had gotten that information, but that had not been passed on to the fire. Dispatch centers should be archiving historical data on locations. And the bottom one, develop coordinated response guidelines and joint trainings with law enforcement, fire, EMS, and mutual aid partners. Now, I've done a lot of trainings with law enforcement. They're usually involving like large major incidents, mass casualty, mass shooting incidents, but never on the calls that we're going to on a regular basis. Never. Never any trainings on crime scene and on how we respond and what we do there. And guess what? Advocates in the room and nurses in the room, you're mutual aid partners. You're all our partners too. Getting all of us in the room together. 20 years later, we're not doing this. I started diving deeper into it, found some surveys. That number is about 80% have responded to DV incidents. Majority of them feel like they've never had any adequate training. This was a survey I found. Interviews of DV survivors felt like they were more trapped by the questioning by the first responders. And EMTs and paramedics buy into the same myths about somehow the victim is responsible for the abuse. And then this stat is what really bothers me. So much that my clicker's not working. Part of that survey, 33% were either neutral or agreed with the statement that DV is a normal reaction. It's normal, day-to-day life. 46% were neutral, agreed if the victim doesn't disclose abuse, there's little they can do to help. They don't tell me, I can't help them. Even if I see it and I recognize something's wrong, can't help them. 35% believe that if the victim stays, they're responsible for the abuse. Does this stuff sound familiar to my advocates in the room? The one that kills me is highlighted there in bold. Over 20% believe that secretly women want to be battered. Now, we could be wise guys and joke around and have dark humor, but I can't believe this is a survey of over 400 paramedics and EMTs, and I can't believe 20% of them truly believe that. That is disgusting to me. And again, somehow they're responsible for the abuse. Is that how society feels, typically? So I thought, is this something just to the fire service, or are we just a microcosm of society, and how do we change that? We talked about that. Most receive less than 2 hours training. The training is superficial, overviews. And why it matters. Why do we need to train? Because we're often the first ones to respond. Sometimes we respond to them unintentionally. I can think of a few times in my career where I got called for a mental health crisis, a psychiatric emergency, injuries from a fall, and you get there and it's not lining up. Something's off, it's not right. Yeah, all right, well, we'll just treat you and we'll bring you to the hospital. Missed signs, limited referrals. We have a chance to bridge these gaps. There's over 1 million firefighters and EMS providers in this country. That's 1 million more advocates that are on the street that can be helping survivors in the most crucial time. And when I talk about first responders, I'm talking about all these people up here. Our 911 dispatchers, sometimes they're separate, police, fire, and EMS. Sometimes they're at different locations. They need the training. Our firefighters, our paramedics, our hospital staff, law enforcement, private hospital, EMS system, we all need to be in this room. And the more and more conferences I go to, I don't see them. I feel like the lone guy in the room, like, yeah, it's pretty lonely around here, you know. All of us need to be working together. We need to know trauma-informed care. What does trauma-informed care mean? It means be nice. Be nice to them. They need to know this. Non-judgmental, interested in what they're saying, concerned for them, and most importantly, empathetic. Not sympathetic, empathetic for them, and attentive to their needs. You have to understand that when fire and EMS providers are out there on the street, when every time you see, I heard the siren go off earlier, so either there was a tornado coming or the local fire department had a call, and I was hoping it was the fire department and that it wasn't really a true emergency, because I don't know what to do for tornadoes. Do you get those around here? Oh boy. Oh boy. So, not every time you see a fire truck or an ambulance going down the street, they're going to something completely sexy. Most times it's garbage. It's a sprained eyelash, a broken toenail. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. They've been sick for 3 weeks, but now they're going to call the ambulance because, well, I'll get seen faster. There's 6 cars in the driveway, their bags are packed, and that's what they respond to all day long. They get really jaded and callous sometimes, and then they might get this call, where maybe that victim is seeming a little distracted or a little a little difficult. They need to know that they need to turn off that jaded, callous piece of them and be nice. They have to understand those dynamics. And it starts with dispatch. What are you hearing beyond the caller statements? You heard that audio before. Are you really hearing what they're saying? That trauma-informed questioning needs to start there. Is there a history of previous violence there? Because the responding units need to know that. Identifying early on if there's instances of choking or strangulation. And make sure those units are getting on the street are getting the updated info so we don't have another line of duty death like Brenda. Sacramento dispatch is actually doing a danger assessment, asking 5 questions on an intake call right from dispatch. And they're trying to determine the level of lethality. My police officers in the room, if your dispatch agency was asking these questions and putting that out there in the MDT for you, is that really good information? Knowing what you know now about people who strangle, especially, if you know that responding, maybe we'll change our response tactics up. Maybe we'll add an additional unit on it. Maybe we'll approach that scene a little bit differently and keep us safe. But they're doing this right at dispatch. I think we all should be doing it. We need to know scene safety and size up on the address. Has there been a violence there before? Has there been additional police reports? Not just has there been arrests made there, but have the police responded there multiple times before for calls of violence or disturbances or whatever it may be. Look for scene clues. We need to know that. Look at the scene and understand the scene. Who's speaking? Who's quiet? Are they denying you entry? They need to know to use a team approach to how dangerous these calls are. And if it's not right, to step back. It's got to be aware of those surroundings. If you notice something that's not wrong, they need to know that maybe their radio isn't the best thing to use, because if that abuser's in the room and they can hear them speaking, calling for law enforcement, that's not going to go well. Maybe use their cell phone. They need to know these things, and they don't. They don't. They have to understand victimology, how to reframe their questions, using that trauma-informed language. Did he hit you? Rely on those sensory questions, and I think Mark's going to touch on a lot of this stuff today. Can you tell me about what happened? Do you feel physically unsafe? In your words, can you tell me what happened? I'm noticing some injuries that are concerning versus, did someone do this to you? Did he hit you? Reframing it, not re-victimizing them. So how do we get them in the room? And this is a problem I hear often from advocates. You know, I try to engage my first responders, and I'm really having trouble. You know, we put out a great spread of food. That's usually a great way to get us to the room. Just tell us there's free food. Show up at a firehouse with some donuts or a cake or something like that. They'll invite you in every time. You show up empty-handed, they'll show you the door. But leave behind some cards and referrals. Give them some posters, stickers, or QR codes, stuff that they can hang around their stations. Let them know who the resources are. They don't know what they don't know, but once they know, they don't like not knowing. And I've spent a lot of time going across the country to different agencies, dispatchers, and paramedics, training them. And once I start teaching this, and I usually have the local DV agency in the room with me, because I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy that had a pretty bad experience losing our daughter. Do some little roll call training, give them some debriefing tools, ask about events that are going on in the community. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It's also Fire Prevention Month, and we do lots of little things. We put tables out. Find out where they are. Ask if you could put up a table too. Introduce yourself. Find out if there's other agencies that already have a relationship with them and see how they got in. One of the biggest things is follow-up too. Follow up with them. No. I lost some of my slides. Did I lose one of my slides up there or no? That's all right. This is what we believe in. This is what our family believes in, collaboration. We can't do it alone, and you guys know that. We need to work together. We need to come together as one. Everybody up there, and I spelled advocate wrong. I'm sorry. Advocates, legal system, police, our religious establishments, the fire department, 911 dispatch, hospital staff, EMS, and our community too. Everybody needs to come together. This isn't a problem. It doesn't just happen over there. It doesn't happen here. It happens everywhere. North Dakota is, I think it was over 6,400 domestic violence cases where survivors had gotten services. I think there was 5 DV-related homicides. It was 40% of the homicides in the state of North Dakota the past year. It happens everywhere. Nobody's immune from it. And we need to work together. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about mental health. We need to talk about, domestic abuse, substance abuse, human trafficking, all of these things. Because when you start to really dive deep into a lot of these things, you realize that they're all interconnected. We need to have these tough conversations with our kids because they have the world at their fingertips. And if we're not modeling good behavior at home, they're going to find it from somewhere else, whether it's through friends, peers, the internet. There's these Andrew Tates of the world, these misogynistic people telling them how it should be. We need to get to our youth. We need to get into our communities. We need to get to our parents and start talking about it and start normalizing these difficult conversations. Stop all this from happening in the beginning. Stop being reactive and being proactive. That's part of my job now is risk reduction in the fire service. My job is to identify areas of risk within our county and find ways to reduce them. Because that grant funding that we like to get every year, you might not get it if you don't have good risk reduction policies. Those insurance ratings and all those other things we like to put all over our accreditations, you're not going to get it if you don't do risk reduction. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We have to come together. We have to work together. We have to. We need to be the change. We know a lot of these families up here too. One of the ones that really kills me is that bottom left corner. Baby. A baby was a victim. Was murdered. I'll never understand it. An innocent child, not asked to be brought into this world, having its life taken. But we need to be the change. We need to stop this from happening. Gabby's not just a statistic, and neither are they. They're real people. They're real stories, they're real lives. We have to do this. We have to do this together. That was the last picture of my 4 kids together, June of 2021, right before Gabby left to go on her trip. Love that picture. Smiles. Such a great day. This journey has made me do a lot of self-reflection on myself, realizing that I wasn't always the best version of myself. Realized that the home I grew up in as a kid wasn't the best. What I thought was normal wasn't normal. Going into a job as a first responder, being taught to bury trauma down so you can continue to do your job. It's my ultimate demise. Thinking that's what would prepare me for Gabby. Was I wrong? This is tough work. This is really tough work. Come on. I think I got one more on there. You can't change everyone, but you can change you. And this is something I'm talking more and more about as time goes on, is my own journey. I dove from one vicarious, trauma-filled job into another. But I still wasn't taking time to take care of myself. And about 2 years ago, I was in a really bad place, a very bad place. And thank God, my wife looked at me and said, "You need help right now. You can't help anybody else if you don't help yourself first." And I got connected to a really, really good therapist, and thank God she spent 6 hours with me that day, and then I went back the next day and I spent another 4 with her, and I see her every week. And I started to work through a lot of things. I spent my whole life worrying and caring for other people and not taking care of myself. And I learned that self-care it's not selfish, it's selfless. You can't fill anybody else's cup up if your cup is empty. You need to fill your cup. You need to take time for you. We're talking about really heavy, difficult stuff today. You have to find ways to decompress. Thankfully now I've learned some of them. My therapist tried this thing, I think they call it box breathing. I don't like it, so we call it tactical breathing. Sounds a lot better. I do that, and I found a lot of really good, healthy outlets, and I make sure I take time. Take time to enjoy the small moments in life. We had Gabby for 22 years. My kids are starting to get older. I spent a lot of time worrying about my career, always having to work, cover people, overtime shifts, trying to survive. I got so busy making a living, I forgot to make a life sometimes. And I took for granted those small moments in my life. When we lost Gabby, I looked back and I realized those small moments in life were some of the biggest moments. Sitting on the couch next to your daughter or your son or your loved one. I cherish those moments now. So I encourage you to make sure you take time today and throughout your careers to take time for yourself, because you're not going to be any help to anybody if you're not taking care of you. And I'm grateful that I'm starting to do it now, and I see a change in myself. And I want to close with one last story. That's TJ, Cat on his shoulder, or Kit Kat, we call her. Her name is Catherine, Gabby, and then to the far right is my Maddie girl. My Maddie girl had probably the most difficult time with losing her sister, because she just adored her. She loved her sister so much. She was in junior high, and she's starting to develop relationships at this time, seeing her sister loved and cared for, and only have her taken. So you want to talk about confusion in her life. Trust problems. This past January, we went on a cruise, family vacation for the first time in years for Maddie's 16th birthday. She wanted to go to Jamaica. I'm like, that's kind of expensive, but we found this cruise a little bit cheaper. It stops in Jamaica. And unfortunately, Maddie got really sick on this cruise. And then one night she was feeling good. And she said, it was like 10:30 at night. She's like, "Dad, I want to go downstairs and get something to eat." And I said, "I don't want you to go by yourself. I'll go with you." It was this like bar, restaurant, arcade. We go down there, we eat. And she's like, "Dad, can we play some arcade games?" I'm like, "Yeah, heck yeah, that skee ball is like calling my name from across the room." We go over there, we're playing some games, and then it was time to leave, and there was some pool tables behind us. There was 3 men standing there, all about my age, all married. And Maddie says, "I'm gonna go use the bathroom quick." And I said, "Okay, sweetheart, I'll wait here for you." And she walks past these 3 men, and one of them turns around and makes the most disgusting, vile, rude comment to my daughter. I work in a firehouse. There's not much that surprises me. And what he said to my daughter, I'll tell you, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't be standing here. I'd probably be in a jail in a foreign country right now. Thankfully, I took time for self-care, how to regulate some of those emotions. I said, "Take a deep breath, Jim, take a deep breath. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna teach your daughter right now in this moment? Your daughter who has so many trust issues, doesn't trust men, what are you gonna do?" She comes out of the bathroom. I'm like, "All right, you ready to go, sweetheart?" She said, "Yeah, Dad, I'm ready to go." I said, "Okay, before we go, I have to ask you one question. Did he say this to you?" "Yes, Dad, but it's fine." And as far as I know, my daughter's never been in a situation like that. And you know what her immediate reaction was? Like it's ingrained in her. To fawn, right? Fight, flight, fawn. She kind of like cowed, smiled, and kind of nodded and walked by. That was her natural reaction. And I think that's what bothered me the most. She said, "Dad, it's fine, let's just go, don't make a scene." I'm not going to make a scene, but you need to know that's not right. I said, please sit right here. She said, Dad, please don't. I said, and I walked over to this person, and I said, excuse me. Very first thing he said, I didn't know how old she was. I said, well, first off, obviously you're admitting you did something wrong. I said, she's 16, but that's not the point. I'm like, did you just say this to her? Oh, I'm sorry. I said, well, it wouldn't matter if she's 16, 26, 46, or whatever her age is. Do you think any woman wants to hear those words come out of your mouth directed towards them? Oh, no. I see a wedding band on your finger. How would your wife feel about that? Or your mother, if somebody said that to them? Probably wouldn't like it very much, would you? And I said, you know what bothers me more than anything? I said, your two friends right here. I said, because you shot him a look and knew he was wrong in that moment, and you stayed silent. If either one of you would have said something in that moment to him, to correct him, to hold him accountable for his actions, I probably wouldn't be standing here in front of you. I said, so you are going to come over here to my daughter, you're going to say two simple words, I'm sorry. That is all you're going to say, and you're going to turn around and you're going to walk away. So he comes over, and now my daughter's obviously mortified. He says, I'm sorry, and he tries to say more. And I said, nope, you're done. You can take your butt back on over there. I hope when you wake up tomorrow morning, you have a screaming hangover. But I hope the three of you wake up better men, and you realize this moment. And you realize that this is not acceptable, that this is not okay. And you're better tomorrow than you are in this moment right now, because she doesn't deserve that and nobody else does. So that's what I do now. I see it online. We were talking about it this morning. See all the time, I'll see a survivor put a story up and tell her story, and I'll see men in the comment, not all men are abusers, not all men are this. You're right, they're not. So what are you doing about it, men? Women have been in this battle for years, fighting. You know what's been missing? The good men of the world to stand up and stand alongside them and support them, to hold themselves accountable and hold each other accountable. Remaining silent is just as bad as the abuse sometimes. So if you're a good man, hold each other accountable. I'm doing it now more and more. I'm probably going to get beat up one day for it, but it'll be well worth it. It'll be well worth it. So I implore you, please, to the men in the room, hold each other accountable. We need to. We need to do better. That's my story. And that was the end of the story until about, oh, yeah, I knew there was one more in there. I think we're going to skip that for now. But, and my daughter was absolutely mortified, and about a month ago, she came up to me, and she kind of organically brought up this conversation, and she said, Dad, I want to talk about that. And I said, yeah, absolutely. You know, that guy was a real jerk, and blah, 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 and wire guy. I'm like, you're right. I just hope that, like, if I wasn't there, there'd be another man to stand up for you. I didn't tell her all the things I was thinking in my head if I wasn't there, or, you know, he would have followed her into the bathroom and all that. And she said, thank you. Thanks for sticking up for me, Dad. And then the next day, she went to my wife and said, hey, Mom. Now, she's been real quiet with all this stuff. You guys go to, like, colleges and high schools and stuff? She was like, yeah, you talk about, like, stuff like that? Yeah. Can I go with you next time? That gives me hope. It gives me a lot of hope for the future. And hope could be an adjective, it could be a verb. I prefer the verb, it's action. That gives me hope that we're going to make a difference and we're going to make a change in this world. There's just my information up there. I know we covered a lot today, and I know Mark's going to cover a lot this afternoon too. So please take my email down. If you ever need anything, any help, whatever, if you have any questions, we're pretty much open to anything. We just want to help. We're not going to stop. We're not going to stop. I'll be totally drained tonight, and I'll wake up tomorrow fully rejuvenated and ready to go. We've traveled all across the country the last few months, and we go all over, and we just want to prevent this from happening again. So please, please reach out. I want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank you all for inviting me here. I hope in some small way it was impactful, not just a sad story, just seeing our journey on what we've learned and maybe taking a little bit out of it, maybe something you didn't know before today. And any one of those things I talked about today, I could spend a whole day on it. I could spend a week on strangulation. I can spend a week on TV 101, So please, reach out. We'd be more than happy to assist you in any way. Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much. It's always so profound to hear you, and more so just so profound to hear your father's heart honoring your daughter's life. It's such an awful time for you, and to share that with us and her story with us, and to try to make a difference. So of note, everybody in this room, Jim has indicated to us if there is anybody around our state willing to do more training in the EMS world, he is interested to do so. Mark Wynn will also speak later this afternoon. He is also interested to do so. So we have options